Now, this is a lecture on in international economics, so we're really interested in what's happening worldwide. So you may have seen this picture before. This is a distribution of lights at night, as pictured from a NASA satellite. So what's wrong about this picture? So this
night everywhere.
It's night everywhere. Exactly. It cannot ever be night everywhere, right? So it's a composite picture, but what does it show us?
Urban.
Right. So this is where lights are switched on, which is usually where people live, where people work, where they produce things, where they buy things. Right. So this is a really nice representation of the spread of global activity. Now, what we're going to be talking about in the next, say, 15 minutes or so, is what's happening between these points. Okay, so these are GPS traces of boats. Okay, so these are boats that ship goods and people and, I don't know, stuff from one place to another, but it's a lot of these ships that go around the world tend to bring stuff that's produced in one place to be consumed in another. Right? And what you can see is that there's lots of stuff happening between North America and Europe. There's a lot of stuff happening between North America and East Asia. And then you have these really dark red lines here, and so there's also lots of activity between East Asia and Europe.
The red and white is different levels of intensity?
Exactly, right? So,
and it's bi-directional though, is it?
Yeah, so this is, so we don't, yes, so this goes just either way. Okay, this just tells us where it's activity between places.
But can we also understand from this that there's traffic over the Arctic, it looks like, what's going on?
Yeah, so to be honest, so this also includes cruise ships and sailboats, right? So, but the majority of these boats are going to be carrying stuff. Okay. So this is what we're going to be thinking about okay, why is it that there's so much going on between, say, East Asia and North America, between Europe and North America? And that's what the so-called gravity model of international trade will tell us a bit about. Okay, so the question here is, and one of the main questions in international economics is, who trades with who, how much, and why? Okay. And so in the next couple of minutes, I have to show you what the determinants of bilateral trade are. So why does one country trade with another? I'm going to try to talk a bit about the difference between the so-called naive gravity model and the general gravity model, and then I'll give you a hint of an application of how we can use these types of models to predict things for policymakers. And here we're going to be talking about Brexit, we just talked about this before the lecture with a couple people. Yes?
Why is it called gravity?
Oh, you'll see in a moment. Okay, so so this is, if you plot the size, so this is the economic size of European countries against how much they export to New Zealand.
So you're saying population is at the bottom?
No, this is economic size, so this is GDP. Okay, so a big country would be Germany, France, UK. And how much in total numbers do they export to New Zealand? And what you see nicely is that there's super strong positive relationship between the size and how much they export. Okay?
Why are we interested in New Zealand?
New Zealand, that's a great question. Let me go back to the map. Okay, New Zealand is, so these are the European countries and the dots. New Zealand is down here. So it's sort of far away for everyone. Okay? That's all it is. You can do this with other things, but this is a really nice and clear picture. Okay, so, right, so the bigger a country, the more they export to New Zealand. The bigger a country, the more they import from New Zealand as well. Okay, so it seems it's pretty much the same picture. Okay, on average, the bigger a country, the more they export. The bigger a country, the more they import. Okay, so those are the first two building blocks of gravity. Okay, and then there's another one. If you just look at, so this is exports from France, just picking one other kind of country, and seeing who they export to. Okay. What you see here is the further away, this is the distance down here, the further away a country, on average, it's not as clear, but on average, the less they export. Okay, so Yemen is quite far from France, so they're going to be.
So where's New Zealand?
That's a good one. Well, it's got to be, I don't know, so one of these, right? It's pretty much as far away from France as you can be. So it's far away, there's going to be less trade. Okay, so we had before, the bigger the two countries are, the more they trade. The further away, the less they trade.
But this is a bit skewed, wasn't it?
Say again?
It's a bit skewed, no? Because like it goes.
Yes, it's not as clear as it was before, but I'll come back to that in a minute. You can draw a similar picture with the imports. Okay, so the further away the importing country is from the exporting country, the less they will, on average, import. But it's, as you say, it's not as clear as it was before, and we'll see about this.
But the reciprocity is probably related to the fact that if you have a ship arriving in one place full, it wants to be full when it goes back.
Say again? I didn't.
Well, you've given us two examples of
Mhm.
reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm guessing it has to do with the fact that you have ships that are carrying this stuff to someplace
Right.
full, and they want to be full on their return.
That's an interesting question. Yes. Okay. But
So,
yeah.
how much is that influencing this image of reciprocity?
That's a good point, but I mean, we're talking about this is trade over the course of a year. There are hundreds of ships going between these places. So, but individually for each ship, yes, that's an interesting problem to think about. So now you were talking why do we call this gravity, right? So there's this smart guy, Newton, a couple hundred years ago, and he notices that the bigger two masses are, the bigger the force between these two masses. And the closer they are, the bigger the force. So that's the physical formula, the formula from physics on the attraction of two masses. So the object one, the object I, and object J. The bigger they are, the more, the stronger the force, and the closer they are, the stronger the force.
Well, apart from Newton, I mean, before you were mentioning how big they are in terms of geographically speaking, or
No,
the
economic.
trade? Okay.
Economic, meaning they produce a lot of stuff. Okay, so it's an economically big country, not physical.
Yeah, okay.
And we can do a very similar thing for the economic gravity. Okay, so it looks pretty much the same way. So the larger economically the country is, the economic mass, the more it will trade with another country. The larger it is, the more it will trade. But there is this distance term, right? The further away the distance, the less they will trade. Okay? So that's well, we can call this economic law of gravity. Okay? And I just mentioned all these different terms, but this is this sort of technicality. Okay, but let's go back to this picture. So yes.
Is this your theory?
No.
Okay. Who's the Newton of the law of gravity?
So, and I will talk about this in about 2 slides, but there's this guy, Tinbergen, who was the first recipient of the Nobel Prize in economics. He sort of noticed that this is happening for trade. There were actually others that noticed this is happening for migration as well, for example, right? So this economic law of gravity, I'm talking about trade the whole time, but you can think of this for many different applications. Okay, we'll come back to this in a moment. Okay, so we had this, we were saying this, it's not as clear, this relationship, as the one with science, right? So let's look at this picture before and look at other types of distances. It doesn't necessarily mean physical distance, as we had before, but you can think of, okay, common language, right? If you can talk to the other guy, then maybe it's easier to sell the stuff, and then the buyer who's buying stuff, you know, I'm much rather going to buy from someone where I really understand what I'm actually buying. Right? So if you color all these dots here in yellow, then you notice that on average, it seems that those countries that speak the same language, they trade a little bit more than other countries. Okay? So that explains some of the variation of why this is not as clear a picture as before. Then common history, in the sense that, so the green ones these are former colonies of France. So there's not only is it language, but it may also be the contract, the way they look like. Okay? So these sort of things, they also influence knowledge. The euro, okay, so the common currency. If you have a common currency, it turns out it looks like there's a positive association. Those countries that have the same currency, they tend to trade a little bit more. And EU membership, same story. Okay. Okay. So we have now we can put this all together and say this is a sort of naive gravity equation where it's not only the physical distance between these two countries, but you can give this a bit more of a structural form where it's also other things like EU membership or free trade agreement or same history. Okay, so these other distances between countries that also influence. And as I said before, Tim Bergen was the first who formalized this in a way. So this is still quite ad hoc because we still talk about it's the economic size, but what's the economic size, right? So there may be other things that influence why there's lots of trade with one country as opposed to another. So this may be think of a sort of price level where things are just generally cheap to produce in one country. So that's probably going to export a lot to other countries, no matter how much you produce. Institutions, right? So maybe there's something about that place that's really good at producing very sophisticated things for which you need very specific legal frameworks. Okay, so I say a country with strong intellectual property rights, so maybe there's something being produced differently than in a country where there's not. Okay, and so we can sort of make this a little bit more formal and say, okay, it's just something that's about the exporting country, something that's about the importing country, so that's the SI and the MJ, and then this phi ij, this is everything that's in between. Okay, that may be physical distance, this may be common language, this may be tariffs. Okay, so you can estimate this, so we saw before in the previous lecture where you can draw these with data, these relationships between variables. And so when you estimate this with those variables that we were mentioning before, so you have the distance, you have the language, you have these former colonies, you have the euro, you have the EU. Okay, so we can estimate the separate effects of these different variables on international trade. And when you do that, you notice that, okay, so there seems to be a negative association of trade with distance, physical distance. It seems to be a positive association with language, former colonial status, have both countries being in the euro, both countries being part of the EU. And so, yes?
Sorry, Professor, but are we going to be asked to do this kind of math for our final exam, or?
Yeah, possibly, but there's going to be a tutorial where you're going to go through this other stuff. But this is, but that's a good question. So why do we do this? Okay, and why can we do? What does it help us with? Well, think about the case of the UK. Okay, so UK is now contemplating leaving the EU. What does that mean for trade? Okay, so we have this example of trade, and so let's say a policymaker is asking, okay, so what's going to happen? So now we know that on average, being member of the EU, which the UK currently is, increases your trade by about 1/3. On average, okay? Everything else being equal, being member of the EU increases your trade with another EU member by 1/3.
Does this count as well for the European Economic Area? So it is like, so if you would count Norway, Switzerland, and the thing would be the same, then you could say that
it's probably a little less than that.
Okay.
We don't have this explicitly here, but it's in that ballpark.
Probably.
These are the partial associations? I mean, because
Yes.
Brexit
These
is
are
in both at the same time, the Eurozone and the European Union.
So these are partial equilibrium effects, yes, and these are control. Given that they're part of the EU and also Euro, what are the effects? But the UK in this case, they're only member of the EU and not the Euro, right? So
That third, that would mean being part of the European Union is how much it increased when they became members of the European Union?
Oh, that's a good point. So this is a so-called cross-section, right? So we only have one point in time. There's no dynamics in the sense that no one's entering or exiting. This is just, on average, that you compare a country that is part of the EU with another country that's...
But not specifically the UK.
Okay, no.
Okay.
Okay, give me 30 more seconds. Okay, so what happens when you leave the EU. Okay, so we can just turn off this EU effect essentially and look at the UK. Okay, so it drops a little bit. So the UK is gonna export a little bit less to France in this case. Okay. So to wrap up, gravity is interesting if you want to ask policy questions, and I talked about the context of international trade, but think of other examples, right? Where do you go on vacation? You either go to a vacation to a place where lots of people are going on vacation to, or it's somewhere close. Where do you invest? Which supermarkets do you buy your stuff from? It's usually the one close by, or it's the big one that's somewhere outside the city, maybe. Okay, so gravity is literally. So we'll expand a bit on this in the coming weeks. But so the general principle: the bigger, the more you trade; the further away, the less you trade. Okay? So that's gravity.
Thank you. What would you like feedback on?
Whether this was accessible for non-economists in the third year of their undergraduates.
I thought everything was accessible except Maurice's question.
Yeah, I mean, you make some, very basic examples, so anyone can more or less relate to. So, yeah, apart from the math part, I guess that in third year undergraduate in economics, I think they will get it. So,
It worked for me because you had the examples.
yeah.
Like seeing the examples helped me to follow the argument you were making because you could see visual shifts in what was in the images related, and then you had keywords revealed.
Yeah, I really like the presentation. It's really nice.
Yeah.
I also think that, the graphs help a lot. So you don't need to necessarily understand them all.
The only point I got a bit, I got a bit confused is when you were showing all the different variables and everything was coming up different colours, but I think I was confused because I was thinking, how are you comparing this? And then sometimes you were like, it changes trade, but I was like, with whom? I don't know, there was like maybe a few too many questions that sometimes I had at some points in the graph, but in general, it was very clear what you like. In general, it was very clear. Just that was the only point where I was a bit,
Great. Thank you. If there's no other comments?
I think so.
No? Thank you.